Welcome back from the lunch break. Our next speaker is Lyndsey Jackson. She will be speaking on integration, data sharing, open source, and the agtech startup ecosystem. Lyndsey is a technology entrepreneur with specialty skills in governance, strategy, and regional development. After her talk, Lyndsey will endeavour to allow time to respond to all of your questions. And failing time, she will be present in the post-talk chat. Over to you, Lyndsey.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pity that we're not in person and I have no idea who's in the room. I have COVID, so it's very lucky that I'm not in the room. I'm one of the statistics of the global pandemic. Something kind of ironic about that though, just as I talk to you about agtech and the stuff that I've been doing over the past couple of years and some of the opportunities that I see for the regions, but also that have dramatically escalated for the regions thanks to COVID. And so the effects of that for anyone that doesn't live in the regions or hasn't had a lot to do in the regions is that what COVID has done is dramatically shifted the way that people work together and engage online across all sorts of organizations. So we know that because we've seen our own businesses do that and other organizations, but it's really happened rapidly within regional Australia. One of the benefits for it is it's made regions more accessible than they ever have been. And it's also meant that people at different levels of government, industry, business are really listening and talking to regions as well. So it is a really exciting time for agtech. I'm going to talk about the lay of the agtech land, and then I'm going to get into some specifics about the app that I have, and some of the collaboration that we've had to do to start to bring all of the different components of the agtech ecosystem together. So I'm the co-founder and CTO of Platfarm, although we're just going through a process at the moment where I take over as the CEO of Platfarm, which is really exciting because that allows me to take the technology that we've built so far, to adjust the strategy and to broaden the approach that Platfarm is. So from something that's been developed for the viticulture sector to something that's broader, and then to go forth for a raise, which is always an exciting part of the startup journey for anyone else that's in startups as well. So it should be fun. All right, let me get my talk clicking. So why am I talking to you today? I want to convert you to agtech. Agtech needs new developers, more developers, great developers. We also need to be training up the next generation, and we need to be imparting digital skills on people that do not have digital skills that need them. People like agronomists and other different jobs and opportunities for the regions. And just to advocate for the innovation that's happening, and because the open source community and the learnings and the collaboration that informs open source is really what's needed in agtech, and it also fits really nicely with the way that regions and regional people work anyway. So when I fell into technology 15 years ago, it's been in open source, and my background before going into tech was around small town renewal, economic development in rural communities, how we keep and attract young people to communities, all of that really, how we build bonds and opportunities in communities. And so when I fell into open source, it was such a great example of community openness and transparency, information sharing, and importantly, communication as well. So the things that you're already doing because you're part of this community are things that can benefit the regions, but there are elements that they do as well. And agtech's important because we need to feed people in a changing world climate. And I won't talk a lot about climate change tech, but it's interrelated with agtech, and so worth thinking about those connections. February 2020, I got Platfarm into a Thrive SVG Ventures AgTech Accelerator, so a global accelerator program. One of the outcomes from that was supposed to be going to Salinas near Silicon Valley in the middle of 2020 for a big Forbes AgTech demonstration day. Of course, the global pandemic hit and that changed the world, but I was still fortunate enough to be a part of that accelerator program. So yeah, really interesting to be working with like global ag tech leaders, people that are head of people that have big roles in CSIRO and some of these other organizations, as they are also terrified about the global pandemic and what we've all had to deal with. Just for people in the chat, sorry about that. Just for people in the chat, love if you could tell me, when you hear the term ag tech, what is it that you think about? Because I'm going to take you through some of my favorite ag tech companies in Australia right now, and you're going to see that it is actually incredibly broad. One of my favorites is Swarm Farm. So this is a farm out in Emerald, huge broadacre cropping. Like, they have machines that push machines to get their machinery bigger and bigger to harvest big swathes of land. But the impact on that land and the compaction on the soil was really causing damage, and bigger machines were not going to improve anything to do with the soil quality. So where they've gone is small bots. So these are actually lots of little bots that can be deployed, but then their configuration can be changed. You can take different components of them. You can turn them into sprayers, or you can turn them into little harvesters, or whatever it is. You can go through vineyards, you can go on crops. So these are one of the best companies in the world that is actually creating bots for commercial market. A lot of stuff that's still happening in ag tech is conceptual, and it's not necessarily ready for scale. But this company in Emerald, so these are their open positions at the moment. They're looking for senior software developers, mechatronics engineers, computer vision engineers. Growing up in regional South Australia, these were not the sort of jobs that I was told, or that we were told, were available to us. You could be a doctor, you could be a nurse, you could be a teacher. You certainly could not be a computer vision engineer and live in the regions. So just incredibly exciting stuff, incredibly exciting transformation. It's also around food and food proteins. So the next stage for food production and for meat production is going to be more akin to brewing beer or brewing spirits. It'll be stuff in big vats, and that's where we will be, creating our meat and our protein products. This is an example of an ag tech startup that I really like, but it's a good example of how wealth is also driving some of the funding that goes on into ag tech at the moment, especially at the lower end. What these guys do is they get proteins, meat proteins, and then they manufacture that protein in the lab. So they do stuff like goat, prawn, Galapagos turtle, all sorts of stuff. So not necessarily something that you're going to see at the big supermarkets anytime soon, but another interesting innovation and direction of where this stuff's going. Food waste and bugs are going to be big and super hot over the next decade or so. Goterra is a Canberra startup. Olympia Yaga is one of the most exciting entrepreneurs that we have in Australia. She's got funding recently through Grok Ventures, which is Mike Cannon-Brooks's fund from Atlassian, who's doing a lot of funding for the Australian ag tech sector. She's got these pods that can go to different locations, put bugs in the pods, feed the bugs. Bugs break down all of the food waste, take the bugs out, use the fly larvae for animal proteins, putting it in dog food, all sorts of stuff like that. So moving towards that, those localized micro approaches which also fit really nicely for that potential of how we can see the regions where we're developing localized systems to manage the waste and other things that we're producing. So super exciting there. Satellite imagery is really one of the big ones, particularly within viticulture, horticulture, and crops stuff. So the satellite imagery that we're getting from space is able to tell us a lot that's going on at the plant level, but also at the soil level. That imagery resolution is getting better and better. Even looking at things like looking at the potential for carbon and being able to track carbon, look at carbon percentages in the soil just from using satellite technology. So this is an example of the sort of imagery that we use in the app that I have, where people want to start to move to precision agriculture. So rather than, say, spreading this entire block uniformly, you can start to define key areas and say, okay, well, we want to target something here, or what is this blue? Like, what have we got going on here? Do we have a water leak, or do we have some other thing that's going on? What's happening at the fringes? And that's really helping to for people to be able to target improved quality and yield on their land production, which really, if we want to be producing more on existing soil, it is this approach to nurturing soil, minimizing the inputs that we're putting as far as fertilizers and pesticides, but also maximizing the impact of where we do spread those things. So I think that's super exciting. This is a really cool organization that is basically strapping GoPro cameras onto autonomous bots or little vehicles, little gators, taking them through different crops. This one's vineyards, but they also do like strawberries and other crops, and then they run AI, and the AI then tells you what are the different elements of the crop, of the plant at different times. So when you do that, for example, you can look at the percentage of shoots that are on something, and then you might say, okay, well, if we shoot thin and reduce by 25%, then at the other end, when we start to get fruit, we're going to maximize our yield, because we're going to be able to, rather than having lots and lots of foliage and lots of small fruit, you can concentrate that down so you get more concentrated, bigger fruit. So this company is also really cool. They're based in Tasmania. But there is a conflict between the best interest of but is there a conflict between the best interest of farmers and innovation? And we know in tech that there usually is. One of the real pushes that you're really seeing is data as the new oil. Generally, this real interest in grabbing as much data from all of these different machines and systems as companies can. So, who is going to own farmers' data? But what is the benefit? At the same time, what is the benefit of shared data and shared approaches to data? So it's something to be cautious of, but also there is also potential opportunity. But you're really getting big companies here, like Bosch. They call their system open and neutral and collaborative. So they're using a lot of the terminology that comes from the open source community. But I would argue that this system is not open source, or the element of open source may exist, but also the commercialization of data is absolutely at the forefront of what it is that this company is doing, for better or for worse. I'm not making a judgment on it at this point. IBM, who are sponsors of linux.conf, thanks for that, are also sat in with people from IBM as they presented to growers in the Riverland in South Australia to talk about putting their fruit on the blockchain. That was a couple of years ago. That project in South Australia didn't go anywhere, but this push still to be able to put commodities on blockchain is very much still live within the industry. At the moment. This was recent. This was just last month, I think. Bayer and Microsoft partnering to build cloud-based digital tools. So you're really seeing this theme of these big companies partnering with big tech providers to start to create data partnerships. This is a really cool, I should pop this in the chat actually. This is a really cool talk. This is Sitcodes, who is an Australian-based researcher who did a talk for DEF CON, around hacking John Deere tractors and some Case IH tractors. So there was a group of ethical hacking researchers that wanted to look at the vulnerabilities of tractors. Some of the learnings and some of the discussions have evolved since this talk, but he's a really great guy for being really interested in what is pretty kind of what's the word when people aren't very educated on something, about it's all pretty new. Like, this stuff's all pretty new and green, and some of the vulnerabilities that actually exist within John Deere are vulnerabilities that mean that that they are able to then say lock down or they use those exploits for access around their right to repair stuff. So farmers not being able to get in and to repair their own tractors. Sorry, I've mumbled on this one a little bit, but I guess the real point is that this is an example of how the agtech scene is still undercooked when it comes to ethical hacking and when it comes to systems that are safe and secure. Here's a couple of examples that he sent me of different display screens. So this also gives you a little bit of an idea about the different sort of display screens and setups that we're also talking about when we're talking about agtech as well. There is definitely moves within the sector to be doing something about this, and about data sharing, and to be setting ethical standards for farmers, and having a farm data code for agtech developers to be following in partnership with organisations as well. So creating ethical data sharing is very much at the forefront of farmers' minds in particular. Probably the one thing that I have to apologise for that I didn't progress from getting sick was to follow up with how the AGStack Foundation is going. I do have a couple of contacts from Twitter, but this is the Linux Foundation setting up the AGStack Foundation. So I'd really encourage everyone that has an interest to follow up with this, to find out how it's going, to find out how projects are going. It feels to me, just from the outside, looking like it needs a little bit of love. And some ideas and some opportunity to go through it. But I think that the importance of keeping this stuff open source and creating shared infrastructure and data standards is really important. So I'd really encourage everyone to get involved. So what am I doing about this? Now I'm going to chat to you a little bit about two projects. One of them is Platfarm. So this is the application that that my organisation has built, and then I'll talk about Collabriculture, which is a collaborative piece of work that we've done with the sector. So I showed you some pretty crappy some pretty basic display screens. The premise of Platfarm is that it works on smart devices. So from the App Store, and it can just be used on phones and tablets. So, really about that democratization of technology. A lot of the stuff that's in big tractors, so big tractors have big tech. That tech costs thousands of dollars. When you start to get down to about under 100 horsepower for smaller tractors, those tractors don't have any technology in them. So right around the world, we've got people that are driving tractors without any technology, and within Australia, particularly in, say, the viticulture sector, those tractors are small and there's not a lot that's going on in them. This is such a nice picture, I think, because you can see that when you're in the middle of the grapevines, it's really easy to lose orientation of where you are. So what Platfarm is a geospatially based tasking and tracking system that allows you to draw in your geographical assets for your property. So the vineyard in this case, drawing in the vine rows, and then you can define the areas of work where you want certain work done. And when we think back about that map that I showed, that heat map, you can define what they call prescription zone areas. define what sort of work rates you want in those areas, and then when the tractor operator is out in the field, they are then being tracked using the GPS of their phone or an extender if they've got one, to show them whereabouts they are in the field. So it really is, and the extension for Platfarm going forward is to move out of just vineyards into any application where we would like to look at the landscape and the assets within it, and then define work in a geospatial sense. So you get this really nice component of data, shared data, mapping, map assets, and then the GPS tracking of those assets. So this is just like one of the nice slides. So here what I've got is the raw row model of, what are the vines, what are the lines that make up the vines, how do we then operationalize them, and then how do we put them into something a bit more sophisticated. One of the tools that we use is Mapbox, and so Mapbox has been really useful, not only for us, but also as a way to encourage other companies that want to integrate with us. So whether or not they're drone providers, or they have drone imagery providers, or they have satellite imagery, to say, okay, well, rather than necessarily connecting directly with us per se, you get your stuff into Mapbox, and then we can pull it out of Mapbox. Because the reality is that you've got all of these startups that are all quite small. None of us have the money to be able to integrate directly in with all of these other companies and providers, particularly the ones that aren't at scale. But using something like Mapbox as that intermediary means that you can encourage the investment to go for the development investment for people to connect into something that others are going to be able to use. So it's a really useful way to start to quickly encourage building out an ecosystem and a set of standards. And then what we're looking to do is to use some of the cool features like Mapbox. So when you can start to do route navigation, for example, what does route navigation look like within the farm or within a vineyard? This is Openstreetmap. So sorry, this picture's a bit hasn't got much definition in it. But the other thing that we've been thinking about and working with the OpenGIS community is to say, okay, well, when we know the rows, we also then know the tractor paths, and those tractor paths are kind of like roads. So we're starting to develop extra geographical assets within properties. And then looking at how they then fit within something like OpenStreetMap, because we have this challenge of you've got farms, for example, that haven't had they've always had surveying, and they'll have really detailed maps, or they could have been surveyed years ago, but you have big pieces of paper and big maps, but there's nothing's digitized. So how do we move the sector towards having something digitized? And that's just not for our application, that's for all sorts of applications that are going to benefit from getting these farms mapped in a digital way. So what are the ways that you can kind of do that that can be shared, that could be maybe created within the commons, get agronomists out to be doing this mapping, training up young people, for example, getting them to do mapping, and then where are you going to put that map information? So part of what we've been looking at is the appropriateness of OpenStreetMap for some of those elements, and then talking to the sector about that as well. One of the benefits then, as you start to think about these things as roads, is you can also look at what already occurs within technology around roads and ordering rows and ordering information like streetscape information. So one of the talks that we took a lot of inspiration from, I should put this slide in, sorry I haven't, was a person called Emily Eros, who did a talk for one of the foss 4G conferences on street sign matching, curb street sign matching. So they have these issues in big cities like New York, where Amazon or whoever pulls up and then they just drop all of their packages on the side of the road, and what they need to know is what the parking restrictions are for that that road. Like they don't want to park somewhere where they are only allowed to park for 2 hours when really they need 4 hours. So that mapping of putting that data and that information on at elements along the curb or along the street, we've then drawn from to be able to say, well, we're going to take that same approach. We've got these elements that are coming from AI and identifying where we've got certain features of a plant or certain elements on a plant. How are we then going to accurately take that and then map that within our vineyard so that we can actually direct work there? So that's been a really cool way of thinking about the vine rows as a street, and then looking at data matching to those vine rows. So then how do we get to this connected data sharing future? So even the way that Platfarm works is we want to be able to connect all of these different elements via an API. Sometimes I do this talk to not very technical people, so that ask me what an API is. How do we bring all of those different elements together through APIs? Well, what we really realized, that particularly within viticulture, for example, is we actually didn't even have an agreed approach as to what a vineyard was. And so without even the sector really being clear on what it was that a vineyard was, how do we propose that developers are going to be able to create a data model around that, let alone a data model that's interoperable, that will mean that we can share data information? So one of the cool things that we did was got a bit of funding from one of the state government organisations in South Australia, and we started this project called Collabriculture. This website is built in Drupal, which is open source as well, and we built this website to start to bring different people together, start to put resources and information about what other people were doing, both nationally, internationally. What people were doing in other industries. So people had done data mapping element projects around the broadacre sector, but they hadn't actually done it within viticulture. Did was then we had a series of workshops, and we're bringing all sorts of people together into these workshops. It's one of the really interesting things about agtech is you're building a movement and you're taking lots of different groups of people that are at different positions or mindsets or whatever along with you. I guess at the center to that is the farmer or is the grower. So they're the ones that you're kind of wanting to take, because you're wanting to firstly create products that are useful and going to be used, but also to get and that they will then want to use and contribute, and that are fit for purpose. So you have them, then you have developers that want to be building stuff for agtech because it's really cool. Then you've got your different industry bodies like Wine Australia or your state government authorities, federal government, whoever it is, and everyone is at a very different position around what it is that they think is important. And in some cases, they've also been doing this stuff for a really long time as well. So, for example, within the viticulture industry, measuring area or talking about work area defined by blocks, so a big might be like 30 rows of grapes. That's how most things had been measured. And when you think about the tech behind it, it's kind of easy to just draw a box and then say, here's a block, do this work on a block. So a lot of things had been block level. But if you think back to that image from the vineyard with the AI, when you really want to start to get down to the plant level, or you might want to be able to get down to an individual shoot level. So you actually need to be taking another step deeper and looking at the geographical assets around, say, your posts and your rows, and understanding those elements there. So rather than kind of jump in and build something, we made sure that we stayed restrained and resisted kind of some pushes within the ag tech, within people that were already building out stuff in ag tech, to just look at the logical data model. So we wanted this to be technology dependent. A lot of stuff that happens in ag tech is still built using Excel, and that's totally fine. But what we came up with as a sector was this data model around the key elements of the vineyard, and the attributes that made those work. And we worked with John Bryant, who has been heavily involved in the foss 4G movement for many years, particularly within Australia. So we really took an open source approach to this information. And as such, we've also published this stuff into GitHub. So we've made sure that everything that we've done, we've put back out into the commons, and then slowly nudging other organizations to also give up some of their shared information, or we've just gone and taken it. So like the grapevine varieties, Wine Australia had that in a PDF document. I just sort of spent a few hours taking it out and just typing it all out so that it could be put into not code per se, but to be able to be put into Git so that other people could pull it out. And slowly through doing that, and really through taking a lead on this stuff, we've been able to kind of like push at them for other bits of data set information. So this geospatial boundary data that they've put together, they've openly given that to us. This is one of the management zones around phylloxera, which is, I think that's a fungus actually. So when there's like fungal zones, so that's a really nice example of information that, yeah, the grower wants to know that, but that also has to be reported to Vine Health Australia so that there are not outbreaks that are going on in other areas. So again, when we go back to that data, who owns that data and what data is useful to the commons, we are collecting information when we start to collect information in the paddock that is useful for other sectors. So how do we set up systems so that we don't have to hand over everything to Vine Health Australia? There's a lot of stuff they don't need to know. They just need to know the information that matters to them. So it really takes a big conversation. Some stuff's been hard to get out, particularly if it already exists within a system, things like chemical spray information and stuff like that. So we've just been slowly working on the benefits of putting this information more publicly. We sort of didn't really appreciate it at the time, but it has also become quite a global project where we've got other countries that are also taking this and then applying it, not only from a country level, but also some of the big companies, like the big tractor companies, are also taking that model and then implementing it in their own way as well. So this really has been about getting those key building blocks together to share that across the sector. My talk's actually a little bit quicker than I thought. So I'd really encourage everyone to follow up with the AGStack project, find out where they are up to, and to think about how to support innovation and capability that's going on in the regions. I do have time for questions. I could have added a little bit more in that for you. Oh, I can't hear you, Greg.
Yeah, mic was muted. Okay, thank you, Lyndsey. We do have one question. First of all, do you feel like farmers and other land experts are at risk of being exploited by the shiny promises of technology and tech companies, or are they coming up to speed about the potential pitfalls?
I think that one of the real things to understand, for people that aren't farmers or aren't growers, there can be this misconception that farmers aren't very tech. And in some cases, they're not. So one of the things that you've got to be careful of, for example, when you're, say, developing a product that a farmer might only use once or twice a year, is if you change that user interface, then the next year when they go to use it, you're going to cause a lot of frustration because they've forgotten how to use it. But farmers, it's their business. And in some ways, they have like quite a lot of downtime downtime because of the seasonality of their work. So they're doing a lot of research. They've seen a lot of this stuff before. You can't talk to farmers about robotics like fruit picking robot machines and autonomous tractors that are just going to be retrofit and kind of, drive through lands. They've seen all of that stuff before, and they've been to conferences and they've seen stuff where they've been talking about it for a really long time. So you can't underestimate that. I absolutely think that there is a data suck that happens around the world in different ways. I mean, if we think about our cars, for example, and the way that the data and the information that cars are going to be able to collect, and that they're going to then be able to share with manufacturers or share with whoever, and as consumers, we're not going to necessarily have a whole lot of control over that. I think that same sort of risk is the risk that will face farmers with their machinery, depending on what it is that they buy or whether or not they want to go down that road. So one of the things we say, those John Deere screens that I was showing you, they fetch thousands. They go for thousands of dollars because people actually like stuff that they can get in and fix. Old tractors without any tech are in high demand because they can get in and then they can fix stuff themselves. So I think that right to repair movement, but also people wanting real understanding around their data and information is really going to be fundamental. And if you don't take that approach, then tools will lose trust quite quickly. And once you lose trust within that community, you're really going to struggle to gain any traction from then on. Which is why I think that shared openness and being really clear about what the different players within an ecosystem are looking for and what they're wanting to share, but also then making sure that products are well built, is really fundamental to ensuring integrity and trust within that entire system.
Okay. So there are no further questions. If you have nothing else to say to wrap up, we could end this session. How do you feel?
I don't mind. Yeah, I mean, feel free to give me any feedback. I was sort of conscious that I kind of didn't go into any of the sort of techie things about how we share some of the assets within Mapbox and what it is that is occurring when we do that, when we're collecting data and then sharing that data. So I could have made that a little bit more geeky. But any questions, or if anyone wants to chat about any of this stuff, it's one of my favorite things to talk about. So always happy to chat.
Okay, that can be done on the post-chat channel, post-talk channel.
Yep. Cool.
Thank you. We'll end the session there.
Okay, thank you. Bye.